Well, guys, here we go. Tennessee, a post-game edition of Off the Hook Sports with Amanda LaFrada and Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. Things certainly didn't go the way that Tennessee fans wanted to in this much-hyped matchup as Tennessee loses to Georgia. Amanda, and if you just looked at the score and you're perusing the score, it doesn't look terrible. But, man, this was a game that Tennessee was really never in. The finals 27-13. Tennessee drops to 8-1. Georgia is now 9-0. Your early reactions on the game, Amanda?
It was bad. It was bad all the way around. It was sloppy. I've never seen Tennessee play so sloppy this season. I mean, this looked like a completely different Tennessee team, and it doesn't look to me, again, doesn't look like Georgia is that great or has figured something out. It looks like Tennessee took a giant step back, like a huge step back. And I don't know where the offensive line went. I have no idea. Hendon Hooker. I mean, this just looked like a really bad team. And they're not. I don't know what happened. I have no idea.
Let's bring Caleb Calhoun in here, who is at a casino yet to be determined. Did you gamble on the Vols? Because if you did, things probably didn't go so well.
Oh, not only did my gamble on the Vols go horribly, my gambles in general went horribly. My one pro Georgia gamble was Brock Bowers hitting 64 yards. He didn't hit that. Okay. The only one I got was Cedric Tillman going over 61 yards, which he did do. I had Jabari Small scoring a touchdown. Didn't score a touchdown. I had Hendon Hooker throwing 2. He didn't throw 1. I had the under. I did hit the under. I got the under, guys, but I also lost it because I picked Tennessee to cover and I took the money line, Tennessee straight up. So just a horrible, horrible gambling day. I apologize, Dave. I was promoting Off the Hook Sports the whole time, and I don't want them to think that I'm that bad at gambling. But
no, it happens. I think this game was a surprise to a lot of people, and I think we're going to find out if Tennessee is as good at the receiver position as we thought. Because, Amanda, I will go back to what you said, why this team looked awful, and Hendon Hooker was confused, and I thought the offensive line looked bad. I think it all came down really, guys, to one matchup, and you guys can jump in and feel free. But I think it came down to one matchup. Tennessee's receivers didn't beat Georgia's secondary basically ever. And if that's where you are, then this Tennessee offense is really going to struggle. I know we talk about them running the football and how they're good at that, and they are, but that's to offset a really good passing attack. And I go to one play where I thought Cedric Tillman could have broke up an interception in the first quarter. I go to a couple of drops. I just didn't think Tennessee's receivers won those battles against Georgia's secondary. I think it's pretty simple because at that point, when Georgia's, Amanda, winning that battle, they're able to dial up some blitzes and bring more guys because they don't have to drop people into coverage. So I think that's the end all be all. And we saw Hendon Hooker more confused in this one game than his previous college career combined, even as a first-time starter.
Yeah, we did. It was real. It looked like, and I'm not saying this like scandalous thing. It looked like Georgia had Tennessee's playbook. It looked like Kirby Smart had Josh Heupel's playbook. I don't think you could have had a better defense or a better defensive scheme than what Georgia had out there. And again, we've seen Georgia this year. Their defense is not that great. It's not that great. It hasn't been this season. I mean, it really hasn't. So I don't know where this came from. I don't know if they just found a way to, or they studied so much tape, or Kirby figured something out, or if he took a phone call from Nick Saban. I have no idea. But Georgia was prepared for this team.
Well, I don't think there's any question those two guys talked during the week.
I don't know. They pretty much hate each other. I'm not going to lie.
Well, no, I'd say there was a conversation had between the two. I spoke to Chris Landry about that, and he alluded to that. I'm sure those guys talk because ultimately, I don't think Alabama wants to see Tennessee again. Now, that's not going to happen. But Caleb, as far as when you look at Tennessee and their lack of composure, that to me is probably the most stunning thing. When things start to go south, or when Tennessee has struggled in the past, let's say against Pitt, let's say against Florida, and towards the end of that game, they have usually found a way to right the ship. They never were able to right the ship at any point during this game. It was one-sided from the get.
Yeah, I think part of that was Georgia. I kind of agree with Amanda. I think the real story was Georgia caught Tennessee off guard with those blitz packages. Georgia hasn't been doing a lot of blitzing throughout the year. And I think with Nolan Smith out, they decided to dial a lot of those up, and Tennessee could never figure them out. I don't know why Heupel didn't have an extra tight end back there blocking them on the left side a lot of times, but you're right. It was receivers not getting separation. Cedric Tillman never got separation on the outside. And then it was also those blitz packages from the blind side that Hendon Hooker just never, ever figured them out. And I don't know why. I don't know why they never figured them out down the stretch. But I think that was really where it came down to. And, Hendon Hooker held the ball too long for a few of those sacks. Don't get me wrong. But it just seemed like the Vols didn't change up their playbook at all after Georgia was doing that.
Mike said Georgia's defense and the fans won this game. Amanda, there was a lot of talk about the crowd noise. I thought an inordinate amount of talk. And I know that former Tennessee quarterback Eric Ainge had said that it wasn't a difficult place to play. I know that Georgia's contingent to media asked Josh Heupel about it, and Mike Griffith, who works for Dog Nation and in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And I do think that stoked the fire. I thought it, and I've said before, I don't think it was the top 5 most difficult place to play, but it sure looked like it today.
I think that might have stoked the fire a little bit. I think also what we're, failing to talk about as of yet is the fact that those playoff rankings came out on Tuesday, right before this game. And I said it, I said Tennessee would beat Georgia since July. And I felt like that was going to happen even then. But as soon as those playoff rankings came out and put Tennessee at that number 1 spot, I was like, uh-oh, because you don't want to give that motivation to
Agreed.
Georgia. You don't want to give it to them. And through no fault of Tennessee's or their fans or their, players or whatever, they gave that motivation. Georgia got that motivation. And that's not something you ever want to give the people that you're playing. You don't want to motivate them by anything more than just beating you. The fact that they put Georgia at number 3 was kind of like a snap Georgia back to reality. They stopped floating through, and it's never good to get that attention.
No, and I think this about Georgia, man, along those lines, and I've said this the whole time. I think that they are a football team that is incredibly talented. I think they're a football team, though, that they will flip the switch when they want to. Now, I think that's dangerous for them. And if I'm a Georgia fan, I'm probably happy today, but I'm concerned about the overall mentality of this team. Why didn't they play like this the rest of the year? And some very average performances. But if they play like this the rest of the year, this is your hands-on favorite to win the national title, right, Caleb?
Yeah, I think this Georgia team could beat anybody. I think we also, my prediction was that they picked up too many bad habits throughout playing so many bad teams and not taking them seriously, that it would manifest themselves in this game. And it didn't. I also think we got to keep things in perspective, guys. I think sometimes as a snowball starting, people kind of forget what was expected of this Tennessee team. They're still undermanned talent-wise in a lot of areas. We can't forget that. And receiver turned out to be one of those, particularly at wideout, and Georgia's just loaded. They're still loaded with talent all over the place. I also want to give a shout out to Georgia fans. They took it personally that I criticized them this week and that we talked about Sanford Stadium not being that loud. They took it personally that Eric Gaines tweeted that they were loud and they caused quite a few pre-snap penalties, and you have to give those Georgia fans credit for that. They did to Tennessee what Tennessee did to Alabama as far as the crowd.
I completely agree. And again, I've said it before because of that open end, Amanda, and I know you've been there. It's not that loud of a place. Typically, I think you can kind of sneak in there, but with the rankings, which you mentioned, with the calling them out about not being that loud, there was no sneaking in there. I'm not blaming Eric Ainge. I'm not blaming the college football playoff. You still got to play your game. But I felt like Tennessee a lot of times was able to sneak in kind of to Georgia and maybe win some games that they shouldn't have. There was no sneaking in today. The Bulldogs were ready.
No, there was no sneaking in. And I'm not going to blame a specific person or anything, but I do blame some of the talking heads out there, especially the ones that did play at Tennessee. That's giving ammunition to the fans. You don't need to give the fans ammunition. The ones that are like, I played there, it's not that loud, blah, and tweeting it out everywhere. You don't need to give anybody ammunition to be louder to come after you even more. That's just my thoughts. Do what you want, whatever. But I think that if it were me, I would have just kind of sat on my hands on that one and not put that out there, because you're just when you do that, you're asking for somebody to come at you. That's just my feelings.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Okay, so let's try to put this in perspective for a second. Okay, so my column, which will be on offtalksports.com if it's not already, is essentially this. Does this body blow of a loss affect Tennessee's psychological swagger? And I mean the positive swagger, the inner belief they've had. As a matter of fact, swagger's kind of a term that is almost has a negative connotation now. If it affects that, their inner belief, then you got big time problems, because Tennessee could still make the college football playoff, Caleb, but they're not going to do so if they beat their 3 remaining opponents by a combined 10 or 12 points. They need to go out there and be exciting offensively like they have been to this point for the college football playoff to say, it may come down to you and another team, both with 1 loss. Let's go with the Vols because they're a little bit more exciting. So that would be my biggest concern coming away from this game, is Tennessee lost any confidence at all. And if that's the case, then you got an issue.
Yeah, Tennessee has to kind of blow out its last 3 opponents. And it's going to be hard because I don't know why Missouri plays everybody close. I mean, they played Georgia closer than they played Tennessee, or than Georgia played Tennessee. So Tennessee really has to pour it on against Missouri next week. The playoff is not out of it. I don't think they have to worry too much about losing their swagger. I mean, we've seen teams get blown out before, and we've seen them still make the playoff. Georgia got blown out by Auburn. Now, Georgia got to beat Auburn in the SEC championship game right after that. This was back in 2017. So it wasn't the same concept. But even before the playoff, I remember in 2012, Georgia got absolutely destroyed by South Carolina. I mean, it was embarrassing. And then they go to the SEC championship game, and they were a play away from winning that game and going to play for the BCS national championship. So, I mean, I will say that you can't really say this is the type of game that happens, because unlike those games, it didn't look like Tennessee just dropped the ball and played bad. No, Georgia just was better, like, in every way. And I do think that's hard to overlook for the committee. But I also think, again, the way they beat Tennessee, the biggest way they beat them was disguising so many blitz packages that the Vols weren't ready for. And you think, okay, if Tennessee corrects that one issue, then we may have a different ball game that we're watching. And so I think the committee will take that into account. They're going to take Alabama's win into account. They're going to take into account the possibility that, guys, it's now a real possibility of 3 SEC teams. If Alabama wins tonight at LSU, we're really talking about potentially 3 SEC teams in the college football playoff. Because what happens if Alabama beats Georgia in the SEC title?
I just don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's a possibility. I think now you're rooting against Alabama to get a second loss, either be it by Georgia in the SEC championship game or LSU or whomever that might be. I don't see any way they get 3 in, Amanda. The optics of that just wouldn't look good for the college football playoff, even if they're the 3 of the 4 best teams. I just don't see that happening. I could be wrong. I don't see that happening.
I mean, I think
what happens if?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was going to say what happens if Ohio State slips up, Michigan beats Ohio State, or Michigan slips up, Ohio State beats Michigan, and then if TCU slips up? Guys, we all know TCU is not one of the top 4 teams. We're watching them. They've won by 3 scores today, but they're barely getting by these Big 12 games. We all know they don't belong. And
it's only won by 10.
Yeah. I'm not. Okay, well, after what I saw today, I don't feel certain that the 3 of the 4 best teams are in the SEC. Okay, so there is that uncertainty just in my mind now after what I saw today. But even if that's the case at the end of the year, I still have trouble believing the college football playoff is going to put 3 out of the 4 teams in contention. Amanda, I mean, that would have a lot. I just don't think it'll happen. I don't care
Well,
what happens with other teams. I don't think there's any way.
well, I think it has to be. I think it depends on how it plays out. If TCU drops a game, we've already seen that the College Football Playoff Committee will rank a one-loss SEC team over TCU.
Sure.
So if TCU drops a game, they're completely out. There's no getting back in. They're out. And I think they beat Texas Tech today, but they only beat it by 10, 34-24. I'm pretty sure it was the final score. With Clemson, hopefully tonight we'll see Clemson lose because they should. They need to lose. My God, they're terrible. But if they lose something, they lose a game on that schedule, they're out. And they're out. A one-loss Clemson team is worse than a one-loss SEC team.
See,
Even if they want to put Clemson in, you can't argue the strength of schedule. That's the problem. You can't argue that.
See,
Just saying.
I agree with your reasoning. I do.
I mean, it might be two Big Ten and 2 SEC, but I think TCU and Clemson, if they lose a game, they're out. Bottom line.
Well, now I actually, if it comes down to a one-loss Clemson team and the third team that could potentially get into the college football playoff from the SEC, I think they're going Clemson. I just don't think they'll take the third team. I absolutely could be dead wrong. I didn't, think they wanted to take 2 teams, Caleb, and they've proven they've done that. I just don't see 3 teams happening no matter what.
I'm sorry. I kind of do. I think the playoff committee is – I'm with Amanda. A one-loss Clemson and a one-loss TCU aren't in. I mean, everybody with eyes can see that they don't belong in. And by the way, watch out for that Notre Dame game tonight because Notre Dame, that loss to Stanford notwithstanding, they've been red hot. And that loss to Stanford was because it was midterm week at Notre Dame. And everybody knows Notre Dame loses during midterm week. So
they were studying.
Yes, everybody knows that. I've never heard that before, Mom.
I haven't either.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. Midterm week. All right, so let's say Michigan or Ohio State just have one loss and the other one's defeated. I think you would be more likely to see 2 Big Ten teams and 2 SEC teams. So let's take Clemson out of the equation for a second. I agree. I will just go on record. I don't see any way that 3 SEC teams get in. I could be wrong.
I mean, I could see it, but it would have to. This is how I think it's going to play out. Tennessee lost to Georgia, and they did not lose in a close game, and that's going to hurt Tennessee moving forward. It's going to really, really hurt Tennessee moving forward because you had to, if you were going to lose this game, if you were going to drop it, you had to lose it in a last minute kind of thing, like a kick or, a field goal or maybe a fumble, something happened where you had a chance to win. Tennessee never had a chance to win this game.
Right.
And that is going to be the worst thing for Vols going forward. You're going to have to see either whoever's from the SEC West, whether it be LSU, Alabama, or Georgia, beat the snot out of the other one in the SEC championship. If Georgia and Alabama face off in the SEC championship, you're going to have to see Georgia just completely dominate Alabama in order for them to take Tennessee. Tennessee's not going to go unless that happens. Someone's going to have to lose worse than Tennessee lost today in order for Tennessee to go.
Yeah, I think that Tennessee, I think this game, quite frankly, cost more than just a loss in a lot of different ways. With the way they lost, I think it cost whatever equity you had with the college football playoff. I think there's a good chance that it cost Hendon Hooker the Heisman. I mean, I hate to share this with you, but I mean, that's just, we've got some fans on here, and if you want to listen to people who are going to blow smoke, there's people out there that are going to do that. But I'm going to tell you what's really the factor. And at this point, I don't think there is a clear-cut Heisman winner. But this game, as hyped as it was, I mean, that's the thing. You're at a casino, Caleb. When you push all the chips in the table, and the chips were pushed in the table because of circumstances, you can lose a lot. And I think Tennessee lost a lot. I think they lost equity with the college football playoff. If it comes down to a one-loss Clemson or a one-loss Michigan or a one-loss Ohio State, one-loss TCU, I think they lost that equity no matter what they do in the next 3 games. And I think Hendon Hooker probably, unless something crazy happens, probably lost the Heisman. I mean, he didn't just look ineffective. And I am not blaming Hendon Hooker for this. His receivers were not open. And that allowed Kentucky, that allowed Georgia to be able to dial up some blitzes that I think surprised Tennessee. And I'm not blaming Hendon Hooker for this. So please don't take it in that regard. But I think there's a good chance tonight cost him the Heisman. Caleb?
Oh, he's muted.
I kind of disagree. I am going to blame Hendon Hooker a little bit because I think sometimes when there's one-on-one coverage, you have to trust your receivers to make some plays, and he didn't do it. But what I would say,
Caleb, he did so. He did that in the first quarter, and Cedric Tillman has got to break that up when he's well covered, and that should never be an interception. He's got to make sure he tips the ball instead of going into some sort of tackle drill. I don't think Tennessee's receivers showed up.
I mean, no, I mean, in general, I do agree, and I mean, they didn't show up, but I still think there were, because most of those sacks were coverage sacks. He was holding on to the ball too long, and because nobody was getting open. But I think sometimes, I just think particularly in the fourth quarter, he was still doing that, and that's when you need to take shots, and he still was struggling with that. And Hooker missed 2 open touchdowns. He had Jalen Hyatt wide open for a touchdown in the first half, and Brew McCoy open in the second half. What I would say about the playoff, guys, there's a third route. I'm just going to throw this out here. Georgia's next 2 games are at Kentucky and at Mississippi State. Can they lose both?
No, absolutely not. No, they
They
cannot.
could. I could see them losing both.
There's no way. There's no way that's going to just.
I could see it happening.
With that much at stake, there's no way. Now somebody asked on our message board, is where we're going to go to that. I want to get your thoughts. A lot of people from Georgia are saying boo-hoo, boo-hoo, why. Well, Brian Merchant said as bad as they played, if they hit those 3 open deep balls, it is a game. That's a great way of looking at it. Again, I think that comes down to Tennessee's receivers didn't win matchups. But so let's take a look at Missouri next week, as Tennessee, I think, not only has to win out the final 3 games, obviously, to be even a factor in the college football playoff. And then I want to discuss what happens if they're not. But let's start with they have to win impressively too, Caleb. I mean, they've got to go out there and win impressively and build that equity back up with the college football playoff committee. I think you're muted. No, Caleb's still muted.
Sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, guys. I apologize for that. No, I mean, I think that, yeah, if we're talking like, if we're talking about what happens if this season ends and Tennessee does finish 11-1, doesn't go to the playoff, loses a bowl game 11-2, or wins a bowl game and finishes 12-1? Guys, again, let's not forget what we were talking about with Tennessee at the beginning of the year, where we were like, can they get 10 wins? And now we're talking like 11-1 is a letdown. And I just think that, I don't know, I think some perspective is somewhat needed. You'll look at the recruiting that's going on, not for 2023, but for 2024. I do think that I don't think 2023 is Tennessee's year. I'll be honest. I think there's going to be too much attrition. But you talk 2024, 2025, I mean, down the road, we're still talking about a program that is so far ahead of schedule.
Amen. And I wanted to go there. So we're looking at Tennessee's going to be double-digit favorites, Amanda, in the last 3 games they play this year. They are, if you go by the Vegas odds makers, they are going to be an 11-1 football team and probably headed to the Sugar Bowl. Who in creation would have turned that down in August?
Nobody. Why would you?
I mean, the Sugar Bowl has so many special memories, and I know it's not the SEC title game anymore, that the champion always went to the SEC. I understand all of that, but the Sugar Bowl, go back to the 85 Vols, go back to The fact that so many great SEC teams have played there, who would turn that down? I mean, that's still a massive program builder. I think they need big time help to get in the college football playoff. But aside from that, what can you tell us, Caleb, about Missouri next week? I know you've done some searching on them. You mentioned Notre Dame had their midterms. Hopefully, Missouri doesn't have their, or I guess hopefully Missouri does have their midterms next week. What do you think of the matchup of Missouri next week?
Sorry, could you repeat that? Which matchup?
The Missouri game next week.
Oh, the Missouri game. Yeah, I think Missouri could end up being this is where Tennessee's in trouble with the college football playoff. Missouri has put up a fight against every team that's played. I talked about this a little bit on Friday. One of the reasons I picked Tennessee to beat Georgia Saturday is if you look at the advanced metrics, Tennessee was the only team that had a defensive line close to the level of Missouri, and Missouri came close to beating Georgia. Missouri is going to get Tennessee some trouble up front. They're really dangerous that way. I think I could see Tennessee. Don't get me wrong. I could see Tennessee winning 65-20 or whatever, like they did last year against Missouri. I could also see Missouri keeping it close. I think the big thing is going to be in the trenches. Funny enough, Missouri has a very, very underrated defensive line. They're top. If you go to Football Outsiders and look at their advanced metrics, they're top 10 in line yards allowed per carry, standard down line yards allowed per carry. These are really crucial details and stats that are really effective in breaking down the line. And I think that they also have a decent pass rush. And Hendon Hooker, as we saw tonight, and if the receivers can't get – now, the receivers against Missouri should be able to get separation. This isn't Georgia. So I think they should be okay on that front. But, Tennessee can't just sleepwalk through this game. I mean, Missouri's been in every single game they played dating back – Kansas State's the only team that's blown them out. But they could have won every single game they played since then.
Do me a favor, Caleb. Go put $20 on 8 on roulette because that's my lucky number. And every time I've done that, I've always lost that bet, but I've gone on to win for the rest of the night. So go put 20 on 8. Roulette's a terrible bet, worst bet that is out there other than slots. But go do that, and you'll win the rest of the night. How about that?
Dave, I'm totally broke now, probably.
Oh, good.
Not really, guys. I'm not that crazy of a gambler, but I lost a lot of money tonight, so I think I might just go with the 8 ball from now on.
An 8 ball, all right, buddy.
No. That sounds like drugs.
We're talking about cocaine, but that's okay. Caleb, have a fantastic evening. We appreciate it. Be safe.
All right, have a good one, guys.
See you, buddy. All
Bye.
right. It's kind of today's tough question or tonight's tough question, and if you're watching this after the Alabama LSU game, know that we may be painting ourselves in the corner because we don't know what's happening because we're recording it. We're live now, but we're recording it right after the game. Amanda, there are one of two scenarios that I think play out, and that's one that Tennessee caught LSU at the right time, caught Kentucky at the right time, beat up LSU early game. Got fortune against Pitt. Alabama is overrated by Nick Saban standards and not that good. And that Tennessee has lucked out to this point to get to 8-1. Or there's the other scenario. They just played really, really poorly against Georgia and were outmanned. If you had to pick between the two scenarios, what would you pick? Or a lot of both.
I would pick a lot of both. I think there was poor coaching decisions made. I think there was there was less talent. I think just all the way around in general, it was just a lot of bad football being played. And again, I don't think Georgia looked that great. I think Tennessee just looked that bad. And that's their composure fell away. And that to me is what was the most disappointing part of the game to see, was that Tennessee's composure, it's like it all went out the door. I mean, they looked very similar to Alabama when Alabama walked into Neyland Stadium. Everything just faded, like the composure faded away. I mean, Tennessee had how many penalties today on false starts? At least 6 false starts today. And that's not the Tennessee that we're used to seeing. It's just not.
I think it it's one of the most simple breakdowns of a game that I've ever watched or covered. And I think it's as simple as this. I think Tennessee's receivers didn't win one-on-one matchups against Georgia's secondary, which is very good. And I think that led to Georgia being able to dial up some great blitz packages. I mean, to me, Georgia's defensive front looked like Tennessee's the previous few weeks. And that's a lot of blitzes, a lot of twists, a lot of stunts. And I think that was the difference. You can't do that if Jalen Hyatt's running wide open. You just can't. So I think it's one of the most simple breakdowns of any game that I've ever seen. And that is Tennessee's receivers, as good as they are, did not win one-on-one battles. Because then you can't blitz and the whole game changes and the offensive line is not nearly as challenged. Hendon Hooker doesn't look nearly as confused if you win some of those battles. And I guess I will disagree with you on one point, Amanda. That game reminded me of the early part of Nick Saban's run before Lane Kiffin, in which they just kind of hammered you and then they took their foot off the gas, which was the one knock I had on Nick Saban early in his run at Alabama. Is I thought one of those games would slip up on him and he'd take his foot off the gas. And really, it almost happened against Lane Kiffin at Tennessee. Mm-hmm. But that was the one knock I had against him. And Kirby Smart, I believe, still believes in that. He takes his foot off the gas, plays ball control. I did see one thing that I wanted to bring up, and maybe this is Tennessee fans getting ahead of yourselves. Maybe this is, you think it's funny, but did you see Stetson Bennett after he ran for the touchdown hold up the phone to his ear?
I heard about why he did that.
So the reason he did that is somebody leaked his
phone
number and it blew up all night before the game. So
with Tennessee fans calling and like leaving messages and stuff.
Yes.
That's sad, dude. Like, why do you do that? Like, who?
Well, I think the only person to me it's sad for, because listen, that's happened before.
I just think it's stupid, not sad. It's stupid.
Calling hotel rooms. You're talking to somebody who randomly called during an all-star game, Major League Baseball all-star game, and asked for Bob Costas, and he picked up the phone, and I got him on the radio. So that happened. So you can. I don't have a problem with the people calling and being fans.
I do.
It's a little jerky. Okay,
it's stupid.
I got a problem. I got a problem with Stetson Bennett's semi-buddy leaking the number. That's
yeah.
I mean, that's jerk, girl or guy,
obviously.
Whoever. I mean, that's
obviously
the jerkiest move you could do.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, you have a problem. Figure out who that guy is in your inner circle, or whoever in your inner circle leaked your number, and have issues with that. But if you're a fan of another football team, like, act like you've been here before. Act like you've been number one before. Act like you know how to win. It's important to know how to lose. It's also very important to know how to win. Now, I understand Georgia fans bark at people like they're literally grown men barking at people like they're dogs. Not a good look for them. I get that. But act like you've been here before. Don't call the quarterback the night before and blow up his phone all night. What are you? Are you 12-year-old kids? Are you prank calling? Did you ask him if his refrigerator was not running? And if so, he should go catch it? Like, I mean, really, like, what are you doing? It's a game.
I do remember.
Dear God.
I do remember Bob Costa saying, "Oh, that's the last time I'll use my real name at a hotel."
Well, you taught him a valuable lesson, I guess.
We got like 5 All-Stars on during that All-Star game because we just called the team hotel and asked for their hotel room. It was a pretty interesting day out of left field. They don't do that anymore. They probably stay under some hokey name like, I don't know.
Pocahontas.
Pocahontas.
Yeah. Anastasia.
Can I get Pocahontas Bennett, please?
Yeah.
All right, Amanda, love you being up with us. Love you being a part of the program each and every day. And I know it's a late night. You've got family in, but I love the breakdown and the perspective that you always provide. And we're with you each and every weekday at 8:30. Again, I would say this to Tennessee fans and I want to say, by the way, that I'm going to be the one. I'm still going to jump in Norris Lake because I thought that Georgia would win from the get. Amanda picked Georgia back in July. before we saw the Alabama win and the Florida win and all that stuff. So I'm going to take that off her shoulders because I'm so impressed by the call. So I'm still going to do that. Yeah, so we'll do that, and maybe next week I will jump in November in Norris, because I believe Tennessee is going to end up winning out and be a real factor. And at the end of the day, if Tennessee is in the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans, it's been one hell of a season. Okay, so just take it for what it is. The way that Tennessee lost is awfully damaging to their equity and what they had with the college football playoff. And I'm afraid it probably cost Hendon Hooker the Heisman. But we shall see. There's still a lot of football left to be played. Amanda, you're awesome. We will have videos of the Vols up on our YouTube page here momentarily. Complete coverage of offthehooksports.com. So have a fantastic evening. Even though Tennessee didn't win, I promise you the sun will come up tomorrow. This has been a presentation of